All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Learning Quick. Super excited to have on another amazing guest. We've got Johnny here who created Remotion. I saw him post this on Twitter about creating videos in React as a video creator, as a content creator, as a video editor. I was really impressed and interested in that. So I reached out and I was like, hey, can you come tell me all about Remotion? So super excited to have you on. Do you want to give everyone a little bit of an introduction to you and your background?
Yeah, hey everyone, and hey James, thanks for having me on. So my name is Johnny Burger. I'm from Switzerland, and uh, originally I am a independent app developer. I used to make my own apps and then I had like this little side project for making videos, which I just created because I wanted to do some promotional videos for my app. But now it kind of like jumped through the roof, and now I am mostly working on that library that uh, we are just now talking about.
Yeah. I love it's such a developer mindset in a good way of like, I need to create these videos and I wish I had an easier way to do it. Why don't I just create the thing that will help me create the videos in a way that I'm used to? And I have so much of this, like when I do actually, when I do animations or things like transitions in my videos, I wish I had code to control it. Like that as a developer, I think we look at tools and we're always like, oh, I could, if I had full control over this thing, I could do exactly what I wanted. So I love the idea of like you needed something, so you built it. That's great. And then it's really just kind of gained some popularity, I think. So do you want to tell us a little bit about maybe a little bit more detail about what exactly Remotion is? How does it work? And maybe not where the idea came from, because it sounds like that was just a need that you had. But anyway, what was the process like for creating it, and what does it do?
Sure. Okay. So the idea or like the purpose of Remotion is that you can write your videos in React, and this is already where some people get confused. They think that it's like you embed it in a website and it's like an animation, but by that I mean like an actual MP4 video, not something that you embed on the website. And how it how it all works is basically you get a frame number from Remotion. So Remotion tells you this is frame 20, and you're supposed to return any React markup that you want using any web technologies that you want. Um, so that's pretty general, and so you don't have much constraints, but you don't have much help either.
Hmm.
Like you, very few things are there for you, so you have to do it on your own. Um, but once you do that, then we take a screenshot of every frame that you have rendered and put it together into a video. Because what is a video? It is a series of images. Um, and yeah, therefore it works. Of course, there is more to it. Like right now, today I worked on audio support. So soon I also want to support that you can like place all this HTML5 audio tags um, into your code, and that it will automatically correctly arrange, trim, use the right volume, etc. That's another aspect, and because only that would be a bit hard, there's also like a Remotion preview player, which
Hmm.
um, which supports fast refresh, where you can preview the video really quick. So I would say this is the how Remotion works.
That's great. I'm gonna share my screen just so people can see this. I've got the link to Remotion .dev is in the chat, so make sure you go and check that out. And then just a quick look at I think the boilerplate stuff here starts with React 17 and TypeScript. So that's what kind of the boilerplate stuff will get you. And then on the screen you can see this. Actually, I guess I could just show you the one that I have open from the real project. This is like the video viewer, which is really cool because you can see each different like animation thing kind of stacked on top of each other, and then you can just sit here and play it. And it does have a really good fast refresh, like you said, of as soon as you make changes to the text or an animation or the logo or whatever, like you come back here and it's ready to go. So it's just like your regular kind of React development experience, having that live reloading server. You can do, and I think this is important that you mentioned, you can use kind of anything in the ecosystem of React or web development that you're used to. So you could do styled components or any other random thing you might want to, which is really cool. And then you have access to the actual Remotion APIs. And I did want to give, or maybe let you give a shout out to your docs. The docs look really good. They're really organized, and there was a tool that you used that people may be interested in for creating your docs. What's the tool that you used for that?
Okay, so the docs are written using Docusaurus. I think it's like a Facebook project maintained by Sebastian Lorbert, who actually recently also tried out Remotion, and he might have a Remotion
Cool.
project coming up.
Nice.
So it's yeah, just all good vibes, and the community using each other's project.
That's really great. I think I'd heard of Docusaurus before, and I heard that it was really good, but it's something that I like have only heard of once or twice. So it's cool to see that someone else had a positive experience with it. So you mentioned kind of like the community aspect, and I think this just becoming a lot bigger than you thought it would be. I think at the end of the day. So, how did you take it from just like an idea that you had to like actually having a product? You have documentation here, and I think you want to make this into a paid product as well and get customers kind of signed up for that thing as well. So what was the like not just the building the thing, but also after you built something, how do you take that and actually make a product out of it?
Um, sure. So I guess I had like a prototype working that was just for me, and I built some animations using that. And like I had like two other apps that I was working on, and I was working part time. That was already pretty much like taking a lot of time for me. And of course, what's also really important is that you like don't focus on too many things at the same time.
Mhm.
So when it came to Remotion, when I thought about, okay, should I actually release it? Then if I actually do it, then I I have to do it right. I don't. On one hand, I don't want to put in the effort and to publish it, and then nobody uses it. So it has to be like a product that has a good developer experience,
Yeah.
that in all aspects, like people can actually install and use and understand using the documentation, right? Um, and then on the other hand, I also thought, okay, but um, if I get it out and becomes really popular, I don't want to like be flooded in all these pull requests and issues and bug reports that are coming in. And then like big companies come and they use it for free. I mean, this is how open source is
Mhm.
working in almost every project. I
Yeah.
mean, the big companies use this free open source software that some poor guy is maintaining after their work hours and not getting anything from it. And yeah, it's just not what I wanted to do. So I said, if I put it out, then I want to I want to charge the big companies.
Mhm. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think your words were free for individuals and like really small companies, and then bigger companies, just kind of anticipating them have the budget to spend on it. And if it provides value, like that's what is important at the day, and people at the end of the day, and people are certainly willing to pay for value. So I love that you had the aspect of like I create it for myself. I want to share it with people, but I also want it to be some sort of product that I can monetize and potentially get something out of monetarily. By the way, Will Johnson is in the chat. What's up, Will? Um,
Hello.
so I asked you this beforehand. I don't think there's any paying customers yet, but where are you with like working towards paying customers? Because I think there's some features that they were looking for and maybe you can implement those and then get to the point where you've got your paid customers ready to go. So what are some of those things that you're working on?
Yeah, so while right now nobody is actually paying, few people are evaluating or like asking for features that they would need in order to use Remotion. So I'm trying to build out these um, new features that enable new use cases. Um, so one of these things is audio support. This is
Hmm.
my number one priority. Right now, every video with Remotion that you put out is muted, which is kind of a bummer, but I promise it's getting there quickly. The other one is that um, so right now you can only like have like an MP4, and rendering that out is not so fast. So it will take like
Hmm.
maybe like half a minute for a 10-second video. Um, but people really want to have this create this interactive experiences like, oh, you can adjust like a slider and like type some text and you can preview the video right away
Hmm.
and maybe then render it out. So this preview player that you have just shown, I want to extract that into its own npm package so that people can embed it on their website,
Cool.
and then you can have like a live preview with where like everything updates in real time, and then as a secondary step you can render it to an mp4 video. Also,
Cool.
it seems like these big companies, they love serverless for some reason. So I'm trying to help them like by writing more documentation and examples on how to render using serverless. And yeah, I think it makes sense that I mean, if you want to render it fast, you actually need a quite decent machine, like
Hmm.
four quad core or 8 core would be really good. And if you can run it as a serverless, then it's much better because then you don't pay all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's it's good that you have like that much specific feedback of what people are looking for, because I think a lot of what people struggle with is trying to create something, then not getting the feedback and not knowing what to change or add. So it's good that you already have specifics lined up. Um, there was one specific use case, and I thought this was so cool, that you mentioned right before we went live, of you using Remotion to do some videos related to, I think it was related to React Summit. Tell me how you use Remotion and what you did with it in that context.
Okay, so spoiler alert: if I'm gonna say what my talk at the React Summit is going to be about. So maybe if Alex is going to watch it as well, then I'm gonna spoil it now. Actually, I made a that means that I made a video, an animated video with Alex Trost's avatar. Actually, okay, so here's what it is. As a demo in my React Summit talk, I took these graphics that React Summit is like posting on Twitter for each speaker. So they say, okay, Johnny Berger is going to speak. He's going to about this topic. And then they put like the avatar and the talk title and like the company title um, into a JPEG picture.
Hmm.
And but also they had all the speakers as like a JSON array in their website. So I thought it would be fun to create all these graphics at once and animate them.
Yeah.
So at the end, I would have been able to render out like 80 of these graphics, which with some spring animations in there, um, all at once, and to like hopefully demonstrate the point that with free motion you could probably spend a lot of save a lot of time
Yeah.
if you have like repetitive content
Yeah.
to make. So yeah, I hope they won't be offended if I say, hey, could have been much easier.
No, I think that's perfect, and that's the kind of stuff, especially as I'm like doing as I'm doing video editing, like I wish I had that like this reusable component, honestly, that I could do and I could write code to control. Because you don't have that. You only have what the different editing software will give you. So in your thing, you you will go and query that or use that JSON document, read all of the information from that document, and create those animations one at a time. So how are you getting like the information from the JSON document? How are you getting that into React and running the build? What does that look like?
Also, in that case, I just took the JSON file and imported it, and then speakers.map, just loop over the array and render a composition um, for each of the speakers.
Hmm.
So a composition is basically just like a video unit in Remotion. So you can render a composition into a video, or you can like create many compositions and then work on each like video element individually and preview that element individually and then compose it together later. It's like a component, but it's a video.
Nice.
So a composition is actually a component plus the duration, height, width,
Hmm.
and frame rate. That's the first Remotion term to explain.
Cool. And actually, since we're there, maybe the best thing would be to go ahead and show what it looks like. So I'm going to share my screen again, and the kind of getting started here is just to run a yarn create command. So yarn create video, and I ran that, and this is more or less, I've tweaked this just a tad, but this is more or less the stuff that you start with. And so you have again, this is in TypeScript, but in the index.tsx, like instead of the, what do they do in, what's the root thing called in a regular React project? The,
Maybe like app.tsx or something.
well,
App.js.
yeah, I meant the actual function that it calls. Like instead of register root here,
Oh yeah,
it
yeah.
like
I
set
think like
DOM element or something.
render.
Is it the root render? What? Yeah, whatever. I don't ever like I get boilerplate code, so I don't even know what it is right offhand. But this is your thing here that basically like kind of initializes the application, and it comes from getting this Remotion video, registering that as the root, and then looking in the video TSX. This thing starts with yeah, I think Trost has it in the chat, the React DOM.render, and you tell it which element to render. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
That's the kind of stuff that I don't ever have to write, so I don't think about. But this thing by default comes with 3 compositions, and I got rid of the other 2 just to kind of narrow it down for me. But this is basically defining a video composition. And you mentioned this earlier. It's got some basic things like width and height. So this is going to be like a full HD 1920 by 1080 video. It's got some default prompts that we'll come back to in a second. You define your frame rate or frames, yeah, frames per second. So this is 30 frames per second. The duration in frames. Now the duration in frames is the total time for the video, right? So this would be 150 divided by 30 frames per second would give this video as 5 seconds long. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. That's a 5-second video. Yeah, it's the duration in frames. And if the frame rate is yeah, so I like these longer variable names actually, but
Yep.
then they are more descriptive. And yeah, so you have to be very explicit with say the frame rate is that and the duration is that.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
then
agree. Yeah.
yeah, duration in frames and frames per second, then you can do some math and figure out it's 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Some people don't like it actually. They would prefer it with like absolute, like say, okay, it's 2 seconds long.
Right.
But yeah, I figured there would be like a lot of floating point bugs. So
But
this
yeah,
is the API.
gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I love, and Trost is saying this too, like going back to your names, like if you weren't very specific with this, he wouldn't know whether it was seconds or milliseconds or like something else. So I do really enjoy this. I actually have been known for doing really long variable names that are really descriptive too. So I think we're probably on the same page there. Um, Trost is saying this is how Blender works also, which Blender I think is a 3D modeling tool and it works with frames and frames per second too. Yeah, good to know. That's cool.
Yeah, good to know it's not something out of the ordinary.
Yeah, it seems like you're following a good norm there. Um, so we have this whole composition. This is basically a video, and it's using this Hello World component. So if we jump over to Hello World component, there's basically three different sequences in here. What exactly is a sequence in the Remotion world?
Okay, so a sequence shifts the time. The first sequence says, okay, it starts at 0 and the duration is the full duration. So actually, I'm not sure if this was in the template, but in that case, the sequence is like unnecessary because it doesn't shift anything. Oh well, maybe I should remove it. But then like the second sequence is more useful. It makes the children of the sequence only appear at like transition start plus 10, that must be 35, at frame 35. And before that, nothing is going to be rendered. Same with the subtitle thing. And so there's also like this use current frame hook, which tells you the current time. And I find it handy that I can like break it out into components. And for example, that inside the title component, if you want, you can open the title component.
Yeah.
That inside that, the first frame is always 0. And then I can shift it around later using a sequence. If I were not using the sequence and it would start with like frame 35, then it would be less scalable.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to the Hello World piece real quick and doing the sequences. So these are basically, you said this, like you get to control when this thing is actually showing. We're not doing the actual animation yet. We'll talk about that in a second, or should I say some cheesy thing with frames per second? Never mind. So we have three different sequences here. One is the logo, that is this thing spinning, and that thing is kind of there all the time. And then we have, notice the title doesn't start until about a second in, and then the subtitle doesn't start until about 2 seconds in, or something like that, or 2.5 or something. So looking at this, like this thing has a transition start of 25, and this would be frames, right? So 25 frames in, which is just about a second, if it's 30 frames per second. Is that right?
Yeah, there are 35 frames. That's a bit more than a second.
Okay, cool. So you have, 25 plus 10 is 35. Frames per second is 30. So this is a little bit more than a second. And then your duration in frames here is infinity. So this thing is basically saying like, hey, just run until the end of the video, I think is what that's used for. And then similarly, we have the subtitle is doing almost the same thing, except it's got a longer delay. So it's got a delay of 40 extra frames, which is about another second, a little bit more than that from the title. So we have our logo, which is kind of starting at 0 here, runs the whole time. And then we have our title, which comes in at about a second, and then our sequence, which comes in at about a second. And then looking in the title, this is where the actual magic happens for the animation. So what's a good place to start in here? Maybe, do you want to talk about what the spring function does and how that works?
Yes. So the spring function, it calculates like the physics of an animation. You pass in basically what is the current time, and it animates from 0 to 1. So if you pass in the current time is 0, it's always going to be 0. If you're going to say that current time is 5 seconds, then it's going to say 1. If you're going to say 0.1 seconds, then it will be somewhere in between. And that, of course, all depends on how long a Spring animation is going to run. So here it's interesting. As the frame, we pass in frame. So we don't have to pass in the actual current time. We can just like lie to the Spring function and say, hey, actually it's I minus 5 frames earlier than it actually is. And using that, we can create a stagger effect.
Yeah.
So yeah, what it does is like the first word, it's gonna appear immediately. The second word will have a 5-frame delay, and the third word will have a 10-frame delay.
And I just stopped in here to kind of show this, and I think I can do. Yeah, this is super cool. So I can actually click through frame by frame. So if you see these words, you see welcome come up after 5 frames. There's 2 starts to come up, and then Remotion starts to come up as well. And this was really neat. I love the way you did this because it's kind of sneaky. You have the actual title text, which is that whole thing, and then you do a split. So you're basically separating separating out the individual words so that you can animate them differently. So after you have your array of words here, then you come down and you do a map. So you iterate through each word. Each of them becomes its own span. Each of them is going to do a scale, and the scale uses Spring that you just mentioned. And because you do the lie trick here and basically say the frame is something further back, that adds in this delay. So you have the index here, you multiply that by 5. For the first one, the index is 0, so that thing will be frame minus 0. For the next one, it will be frame minus 5, and the next one will be frame minus 10, which gives you that staggered effect for each one of these different words, which is super cool because you've got like a combination of just being really creative with JavaScript for splitting that stuff up and then mapping it back to spans, and then also tying it into the Spring function there to have it do your animation. It's super, super cool stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So the basic idea is to just basically have like 3 main APIs: the sequence, the use current frame, and the composition. And then the rest is then you have to figure out how you want to create your effect. In this case, I figured, okay, it must work something like that. I want the words to appear after each other, and then you just write out React,
Yeah.
HTML, CSS, and yeah, I mean, and what's also really cool is, or like what I enjoy about it is that, you know, it can be a bit hacky, or here some people would say you should not inline this style, you should use memo, so it will be a faster React code, or like you should clean this up, use a CSS file, but in the end, what's going to be shipped is just an MP4 video, and it doesn't matter. So
Yeah.
you can be a bit more looser and have more fun.
Yeah. I have noticed a lot of in the demos that I've seen, which there's several videos on YouTube for anybody that's interested in learning more. And I'm planning on doing a YouTube video on this for maybe next week. We'll see if I get to it. But there are several videos that kind of go into this. And I did see a lot of inline styles, but like usually people are like, oh no, inline styles. But again, like you said, if it helps us make this work and we can get the thing created that we want, that's really all that matters. I was a little confused on Spring because if I hover on this is TypeScript, so it's got all the documentation and stuff. Great job there. It says that from the to and from are optional because it's got the question marks there. If the to and from are not defined, does that mean it starts at 0 and then it goes to however long the sequence is your end? So it goes from like the beginning of the sequence to the end of the sequence by default?
Um, no, so it
Okay.
goes all by default. It goes from 0 to 1, and if you pass the from and to, then you will override it. So you can say from 1 to 0. Yeah, actually, I never used this API. I I I agree that it might just be confusing and you might actually not need it because because basically there's also an interpolation
Hmm.
method
I was gonna show that one
and
next. Yeah.
you could do it with that.
Hmm.
So I never used the from and to um, parameters. Yeah, but yeah, it's I hope it doesn't hurt too much. And also the duration, that's a bit of a tricky one. So the duration in Spring animation, there's like no duration. The duration is being uh, like the duration is defined by like these physical properties, damping, stiffness, mass.
Mm,
This
okay.
in the
Yeah.
end determines the duration.
Oh,
And
okay.
only that. And so it's like if I want to have like a spring animation that goes like 10 frames, that's actually pretty hard to do. So I
Okay.
might introduce like an API, something like measure spring that tells you how long that
Okay.
animation actually goes
Yeah.
in the future. But by the way, fun fact, it's like a spring animation is technically never done because like it goes woof, 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 and becomes like the waves are becoming the swings are becoming much smaller,
Hmm.
but technically it like keeps swinging forever, right? It's just like at some point it's not noticeable anymore.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
we would have to you would then have to like provide a value or like we give a default for when is the
When is it
when is it
done?
so small that we consider the
Yeah.
animation done.
That's cool. So I'm glad you clarified this, and I love having people on to ask them questions because I was thinking from and to were meant to be like the starting frame to the end frame, but that's not at all what it is. This is what the value is that you're changing. So in this case, we're changing the transform from the defaults of 0 to 1, and then the time of that thing is defined by this config. Super cool. And then the delay, like you said, is from this negative I times 5. So we kind of stagger them coming in, which is really, really nice. And that helped me a lot. The other one that you mentioned is in the subtitle, and it does something very similar where it uses the interpolate instead of spring. So do you want to explain a little bit about what interpolate is here and how that works?
Sure. So interpolate, that's the easier way to animate things. I would say start with interpolate, that's
Yeah.
for beginners, and then you can get into Spring. Although Spring is much cooler and will look much smoother, with interpolate, you can start making some. So this will do like a linear animation.
Hmm.
Basically, what this code snippet that you have in front of you is doing, it's animating the opacity over time. And it
Hmm.
says at frame 0, the opacity is 0, and at frame 30, at 1 second, the opacity is 1. And if it were, for example, frame 15, then the opacity would be 0.5.
Yeah. And that is super clean. So this first array with two properties is the timing. So what frame do you start at? What frame do you end at? And then the second one is the corresponding values there of 0 to 1. And you could do this, like you could figure this out manually, right? If you looked at the current frame and did some division and that kind of stuff. But this just takes care of all that for us, which is really cool. So we do our interpolate, it gives us opacity, and then we just apply that as the opacity style inside of, in this case, our inline styles. But you could use any way that you wanted to. That's really cool because it takes care of all the adjustments, and then you just add it down there. And you mentioned this is going to be, it's not springy. It's just from 0 to 1. And I think with the spring by default, if you look at how the words come in, you see that welcome gets like slightly, or I think they all, don't they get like slightly bigger than full and then come back down a little bit?
Um,
Or maybe not on these.
so I think not there.
Yeah, I don't think they
Actually,
do there either.
That depends on the damping parameter.
Hmm.
By default, if you want to remove the damping parameter in the title, then you will see it will become like really
We do.
jumpy. Or you can either remove it or reduce it. Yeah.
So let's see what happens if we remove this. That's got the like go in and come back, like grow too much and then come back, which is always a really nice effect. I like that a lot. So the higher the number is actually kind of constricting it, I think. So 100 is not letting it do that expand and bounce type thing. If you get rid of it, I don't know. Do you know what the default is? The default value 0 for that if we don't pass in anything for damping?
Oh, I don't know at the moment.
Okay.
It's surely lower than 50.
Okay.
And yeah, often I just put in like like this is my favorite config, just like damping 200 and nothing else. Um, I That's like a really nice sliding or scaling um, animation. That's
Cool.
also what I use for most of my videos.
Cool.
There's also
Well,
like mass. Mass is kind of like the speed. If you reduce the mass, it becomes faster. If you
okay.
increase the mass, it becomes slower.
So if we did 0.1, that should go faster now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, really. Okay. So, and then if we put this up to 9, it comes in a little bit slower. This is really cool. And the real time, like the hot reload of this is great. I mean, this is like as soon as I change stuff, as you would probably expect, even though this seems much more complicated, um, it does it right there. That's really cool.
Yeah, I can't take any credit for it. It's yeah, literally just the community who is like basically I set up a normal React project,
Hmm.
and yeah, because Remotion is also pretty close to React, it just works like that.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, as long as it works, again, that's what matters. I guess maybe the last thing to demo that we should try out is how do I actually get the video out of this? And I think I run an npm run build, and it will build the um, what's the right word? Not a composition. It will build the composition based on that ID. So this is the only
Exactly.
composition that we have. And if we do this, this is going to build that composition with that ID. It's going to use this index tsx file, which is where all the compositions are defined. And then the output in this case is going to be out.mp4. Did I get all that stuff right?
Yes, perfect. That's
Sweet.
exactly how it works. You can do
Cool.
npm run build.
Let's do a build. And you do have to have the what requirements do you have to have on your machine? You have to have, I forget what the name of it is, but some sort of video
It's
thing.
called ffmpeg.
Okay.
That's the yeah, that's like a really cool tool which will do a lot of video processing and manipulation. It's like a command line video editing tool.
Hmm.
Oh, I hope you have it installed.
I honestly don't know if I do or not, so we'll see.
Okay, it's working.
Okay, cool. So that looks like it worked. So that would have gone to
um,
video just
it's
out.
there at the
Yeah,
bottom,
there we go.
out.mp4.
Can you view a video in? What happens if it'll just show text? No, not at all.
Oh yeah.
You can't open a VS
If
Code.
you,
So let's.
I was worried you will like crash your VS Code, but it handled it just fine.
Yeah. You never know how that stuff is going to go. Let me pull this up over here. So let me get to my code directory, and I do a lot of my tests and stuff in a delete me directory for stuff that I don't necessarily want to keep. And then I can open this, and hey, there's a video created with React. I mean, it's really, really cool. Um, and I guess the last question, so when you did, how I still am slightly confused on that build for all those videos where you pull it in the JSON file and you did all of them. Were you having to run a build command multiple times and associate that with different pieces of text, or how did that work exactly?
Yes, in that case, I just created multiple compositions, and then I would have had to run multiple build commands. But if you want, I can show you how to, like, now change the text, for example,
Mm-hmm.
without having to change your project. Now you do just everything on the command line.
Okay, sure.
For that, you just have to do npm run build, and then dash dash, and then you have to do dash dash again because that's how npm forwards these
Oh,
command line
the
arguments.
yeah, yep.
And then, okay, it's gonna be a bit tricky, but we'll figure it out. Then you say props. I think you say equals.
Like the word equals
Oh, no,
the
props
equal
equals.
sign,
Um,
like that.
yeah, and then so now we have to pass in um like the actual props to a React component. It's that simple. The actual props to the Hello World React component, and it has to be um parsable by the JSON.parse.
Mm-hmm.
So for that we have to use double quotes. We have to write a JSON that uses double quotes, and to not get any trouble, you best wrap it in single quotes.
Okay, so we'll have
Okay.
single quotes, and then we're putting a JSON object inside of there,
Yeah. So you can
and then
say
key of title text is new title, like that,
exactly.
and then oh, I guess that's it. I can just leave that there.
Yes, that should work.
Okay. So in your thing, did you have a script that pulled in the JSON file, and then for each different thing that you pulled in, you ran a new build command and passed in those properties? Is that how that worked?
That's how I would have done it, but like I already was like 2 minutes over the limit, so I didn't. So I just rendered out one video and said, you. I tried to make it hopefully obvious how you would have to render out the other videos, but I didn't actually do that step.
Okay, but that's how you would do it.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, this is super exciting. So, and I'm thinking about how I or we at Auth0 can use this maybe at like a conference or something to kind of create different things for people based on that, and it could potentially run this kind of command and pass in
Yeah,
the
it would be really
prompts.
cool.
Let's see.
Oh, it failed because it would overwrite the video. So you can
Okay. Is there a prop that I can
so
pass
you can
in
either
for
delete the video or like pass in dash dash overwrite.
dash s overwrite?
Yeah.
Just like
And
that?
yeah, and actually I think it's annoying. So I'm gonna make overwrite the default behavior in V2.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Super cool. This is great. Like there's a couple of comments. Miko just got in the chat. 1991. Were you born in 1991? I was born in 1991. But Miko and Robert Tables is really enjoying this, which I am too. This is so cool. So that thing
Awesome.
should be ready, and now it should have the new title. Yeah, sweet. That's great. That's so cool. So yeah, you could go through and do that for anything that you wanted. Really neat. And I mean, obviously, like those are just Hello World examples, but combining that together to do whatever other animations and stuff you need would just be doing more of the same thing.
Yeah, I can. What I think where it becomes really cool is where instead of like passing props, you could just fetch data from an API.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have like a use effect, do a fetch, store that in a state. Then there's like two APIs called delay render and continue render. So
Mm.
it's pretty simple, but with that you tell Remotion, hey, let me first fetch the data and then you can start rendering it. And yeah, using that you can turn it up to the next level. Like a weather company asked me, and I said, yeah, just fetch the weather from your API,
Uh-huh.
render it every day, and you get always the current forecast.
That's cool. And then yeah, they could render that every day, and then they could just display it whenever whenever they need it. That's great. That's so cool. Um, I think we're at almost an hour. As we kind of wrap up, I think you had a community shout out you wanted to do. Do you want to share what that is? And I'll grab a link for that and put it in the chat.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for letting me shout out. So I think the where you can reach me and other people who can help you with Remotion in case you ever struggle, and just if you want to see other projects for inspiration. We have a Discord server with, I think right now it's about 200 people in it. So pretty cool that so many joined, and really, yeah, lots of yeah, community stuff happening. I post some updates, and people post the videos that they make. So check that out.
It's really cool. So I've got a link to the Remotion Discord is in the chat. I've got your Twitter link in there as well. Um, and then I put a link to your YouTube channel last. So I know you've got a couple of videos on your YouTube channel about Remotion, so people can go and check those out. There's also, I think I mentioned this before, like I did a search before coming on stream to get some extra background. And there's probably 10 or so videos from other people on Remotion, which I think is really cool for it being a pretty new product. And I am planning on doing one on my channel as well. So I will publish this stream on YouTube, and then I will hopefully create another like short 10-minute video on how to do some of the stuff that we just did, which I think will be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot that even you are creating your own video. Um, yeah, really happy about the shout out and the support, and that you like it. And in general, that people really seem to be so positive about it. It's really awesome, and I don't take it for granted.
Well, cool. Yeah, I love being able. I love seeing people build cool stuff. That's kind of the cool thing about developers is you have the ability to build whatever you want. And this started, like you said, from having a need for yourself. So anyway, thanks again for coming on the stream, for sharing with me. I will definitely share the video when I create it and help other people see and understand how cool this is. And excited to see where this goes in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Thanks to the people in the chat, and yeah, I hope we stay connected.
Yeah. All right. See you, everyone. Thanks for hanging out, and I will catch you next time.